Alright, what's going on, guys? For the last 2, even 3 years, here on the channel we've been doing extensive research into literally everything about Elden Ring, finding as much as possible, ranging from the tiniest gameplay details that most likely will never happen to the majority of players, to significant lore discoveries that can fundamentally change the entire meaning of the game. And now with the DLC on the horizon, just under 2 months away, the investigations have been completely revived, and the community is on fire, still even this far from release, finding new things in the game that I guarantee you probably did not know. So as we get into that today, if you enjoy all things Elden Ring and are hyped for the DLC, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's begin. For the first entry in today's list, we're heading over to Castle Sol for a bit of myth busting. And here beyond the Church of the Eclipse Grace, we find one of the most notorious enemies in the entire game, a lone banished knight that likely has sought the end of more players than the majority of the game's side bosses. And that's due to a few factors that are unique to this enemy, the most potent of which is its extreme aggro range and ability to teleport behind the player, which happens as soon as you're detected, even if you try to approach quietly. So naturally we had to ask the question, is there any way to sneak up on this banished knight? Now there are a number of items that can give you additional stealth, including the Black Knife set, the Concealing Veil, Unseen Form spell, and Assassin's Gambit Ash of War. And we tried a combination of all of these. First off, with the Black Knife set, Concealing Veil, and Unseen Form, you can see here that I'm able to climb this ladder without aggroing the archers nearby that would normally try to shoot you off of it. However, using all of this and trying to approach the banished knight, he still aggroes even from that great distance. This time trying Assassin's Gambit instead of Unseen Form, we had the same result. Even trying all of this while using ranged spells that don't technically make sound on casting, in every sense there was no way to hide from this guy. So that left one final test to see if it was possible to sneak up on him. That would be by using all of this in addition to the Mimic's Veil. And as you can clearly see, unfortunately, the results were the same. So it seems this banished knight in particular is impossible to sneak up on. Clearly they wanted this to be some kind of mini boss encounter, and I think they definitely succeeded in creating that experience. Also, turns out that if you wear the Black Knife set while doing the Mimic's Veil, it creates this very funny glitch where your character model is still present alongside the object, and for some reason that is still not patched. One of the most interesting discoveries that I've seen over the past few months comes from a recent breakthrough in the data mining community, which in turn led to the discovery of mini cut areas. Now Sekiro Doobie recently made a video showcasing many of the new underground areas that were found, the surface area of which was restored in game, and you can see him explore all of those over on his channel. But one of the most fascinating parts of it to me comes from a discovery in Farum. High above in the tornadoes of Farum, tucked away in the code, are the remains of what would have been an interesting island. We can see these very Romanesque ruins with statues of dragons along the top, varying types of trees, and seemingly no paths of access. This island isn't particularly large, but offers enough space for maybe a few enemies or some kind of mini boss, but beyond that, no surviving aspects of what it would have been survive aside from the general shape, at least within the game. But if we go outside the game to Elden Ring's art book, we can actually see what this island would have been. Right there in the middle we can clearly see the same ruins with the same statues and the same trees as found on the cut island. And from this image it seems much more vibrant and alive than the surrounding areas of Farum that we find in the final game. But given that this area was given its own concept art, even having the player character approaching it, it makes you wonder what its original intention was and why they ultimately decided to cut it from the game. Y'all let me know what you think about that down below. This discovery was actually found a long time ago, but was very new to me with over 400 hours in the game, and pretty much everyone else I talked to about it, so I thought we might as well discuss it in this video. The Nox enemies in Elden Ring aren't the most challenging in the game, and by the time you make it to Sellia and fight the boss there, you're likely more than capable of taking these guys out fairly easily, which is why there's a detail about the Nox monk specifically that you likely missed. If you manage to get the Nox monk down to low health, the ones that wield the Nox flowing hammer, they have a unique ability to transform that hammer into a pair of dual shields, which they then use in a brawler stance. What makes this interesting is that if the player uses the Nox flowing hammer, they don't have this ability, and in addition to that, these shields are not dropped by the Nox monk. In fact, there's no way to get them at all, which is a shame because they remind me a lot of the piercing shield from Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and that was always a lot of fun to use. The shields themselves actually have a pretty cool moveset and seem to block attacks the entire time they're attacking, which could feel a creative creative niche in the PvP side, but what do you think about these shields? And if we could get them, would you use them? Probably the least threatening enemy in the entire game is Greyoll the Slumbering Dragon. And aside from letting out a pretty terrible roar that wakes the other dragons up, he doesn't really do anything, which makes him such a great early game farm because there's virtually no risk involved. At least that's what we thought, up until challenge run YouTuber Scumnut was playing the game where enemies move 500% faster, and well, this happened.
What the f? Ain't no way. Yo, come on, bro. What the f? Jesus Christ. Yeah, someone said disable dragon, my ass. What the f do you mean?
So clearly that was not supposed to happen, but it does reveal some interesting things about Greyoll, specifically the way he's coded, because immediately after Scumnut got out of range, Greyoll returned to his original position. However, shortly after this, when Scumnut returned to trying to farm him, he got up once again, this time breathing fire, which actually ended up killing him. So what this ends up revealing to us is that Greyoll actually does have a full moveset, presumably of a standard dragon, likely such as a Geel, and can, under some circumstances, assuming no other mods were employed, be woken up. And this wouldn't be the first time that using a mod that changes something so simple, such as in this case with movement, reveals hidden details about enemies in the game, like we saw a while back where randomizers allow the Godskin nobles to use their hidden ability of waking each other up. So as hilarious as this was, it's equally as interesting, and makes me wonder what a prime Greyoll boss fight would look like. Now let's get into a little bit of lore. One of our most recent videos here was diving into the lore of this statue we can find in Malakath's arena. It's one of the biggest lore mysteries that's been prevalent in the community for a long time, trying to decipher the identity of the girl the statue is depicting. There was one very fascinating detail that's been left out that I was only recently made aware of, involving not the girl but the wolves. And that's actually one of the key features of these wolves, their snouts. The noses of these wolves are sharp and tilt upward almost like a pig, which is actually nothing like the wolves we find roaming the lands between. Instead, the noses of the wolves in the statue are identical to the red wolves of Radagon, even having the exact same ears, elongated neck, and ridge along the muzzle. And I really wish I would have known this a little over a week ago when I made that video, because I do think it throws a bone to the camp that believes the subject of the statue could be Marika. Now, I do think this statue is going to get expanded upon in the DLC's lore. I'm now going to be on the lookout for more red wolves of Radagon. One of the most fascinating creatures in Elden Ring are the Cemetery Shades. With less than a handful in the entire game, the lore around them is few and far between. But what makes them such a fascinating creature is the fact that they're a reanimated body, controlled by a little crab that's taken over their head. But one question I consistently had about these guys was, where did they get their weapons? Considering that the crab likely took over a body that's been in the Erdtree roots, it was a little bit weird that they have these very unique mantis blades that aren't found anywhere else in the game. That was until someone suggested that these aren't blades at all, but rather the mantis blades are the claws of the crab that took over the body. I think that is exactly what they are, which would also explain why when looking at the mantis blades, they look like they're made more out of chitin than steel and can be unfolded to gain extra reach. And it makes me always appreciate how FromSoftware handles details like this, because they could have just as easily given him daggers or some other kind of common weapon, but little things like this add that extra touch that makes the world come to life. One aspect of these videos that I always enjoy is how we can take things from the game and find the inspiration from them in real life, learning something new in the process. And for this one, we're going to the Hidetaka, specifically the Hidetaka roots at the core of its trunk. Here we can see that the scarlet rot is eating the tree from the inside out, creating this massive hollow cavern. But despite that, the tree still has its shell of bark. This way of rotting appears to be based on the real phenomenon called heart rot. Heart rot occurs whenever a tree's heartwood becomes infested with fungal spores. This happens while the tree is still alive and standing, but the fungus begins to grow as the tree begins to decay from the infection. It's very common and is the reason you'll see those hollow logs out in the forest. But one part of it that I think is pretty cool is that while the tree is still standing and alive, it will grow fruit of mushroom along its outside, which is exactly what we see happening at the Hidetaka. The outside of the tree and its branches are completely covered in fungi, along with all sorts of rot and withering creatures. Now, while while this doesn't tell us anything profound about the game, it does give us an interesting look at FromSoftware's design philosophy, taking these mundane and ordinary things we see on a daily basis in real life, such as trees and mushrooms, and imagining these whole fantasy worlds underneath. And I think what makes good fantasy compelling is when it has its roots primarily in reality. So I think those connections there are pretty cool. But since the DLC is just around the corner, it's only fitting that we have a bit of unhinged speculation in here. And for this one, let's take a look at Messmer's spear, specifically its guard. When we get to this shot here and zoom in, we can get a pretty good look at it. The guard is this sort of U-shape with other entwining curves going in the opposite direction. But one thing I couldn't help but notice about it is how similar it looks to the symbol of the Confessors, which we can see on their hood, also being these sort of inverted arches. We see this symbol on things like Kribus's vial and other items associated with the Confessors, but this symbol isn't identical to the one that Messmer wields, at least not in the trailer, but in the promo art, and on the little spears that he summons up after his slam attack. But taking a look at this image, we can see that on these secondary spears, and the one he holds in the key art, the guard is almost identical to the symbol of the Confessors. But is there a connection here? And if so, what is it? We don't have all the information yet, but there is a very interesting idea. The incantation Darkness has a description that reads, "Incantation of the Two Finger Servants, who once served as the assassins of the Round Table Hold, creates a veil of darkness that conceals the caster. This incantation can be cast while in motion or crouching. The assassins were themselves once tarnished, who had strayed from guidance, and they pursued their duty in the darkness that is without grace." I find the wording there to be very interesting. It specifically says creates a veil of darkness, and we know that the Land of Shadow is veiled by Queen Marika, hidden in the darkness of the shadow of the Erdtree, and in the last sentence of that, it states that the Confessors walk in the darkness that is without grace. Now let's consider what Miquella did to get to the Land of Shadow. In the official statement of the DLC, it says that Miquella divested himself of all things golden, the same wording used to describe the Tarnished losing their grace. So there's too many little coincidences here for there not to be some kind of connection between Messmer and the Confessors, or at least the Confessors and the Land of Shadow. It'll be interesting to see how this quiet part of the lore may be further expanded upon in the DLC. But what do you guys think? Anyways though guys, that is going to do it for the video today. I hope you enjoyed. If I showed you something that you didn't already know, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you're new around here. But with all that, I will catch you in the next one.